A deadly viral pandemic is sweeping the globe. Early efforts to control the spread prove ineffective, and hospitals are rapidly inundated with infected patients. As they reach capacity, field units need to be erected to accommodate the overflow, and eventually, mass shutdowns are implemented. Due to the novelty of the virus, doctors initially have trouble staving off severe illness for at-risk patients, shaking the public's confidence in the medical establishment at large, and a fear-stricken populace begins to fall victim to conspiracy theories and misinformation. Some panicked citizens cling to so-called miracle cures, others defy lockdowns, but the majority of people, frustrated with a patchwork federal response, engage in mass protests against the government. Tensions escalate to the point where military police are sent into cities to quell the intensifying unrest. Sound familiar? Sounds like us, right? It's not. The setting is the idyllic lakeside city of Lausanne, Switzerland in October 1918. They very much went through what we are going through today, and some. That autumn, Switzerland, besieged by war on its borders while the Spanish influenza spread silently within them, would soon become a major hotspot of infection and unrest. Hospitals were overwhelmed with patients and short on protective equipment. Public service announcements had to be released daily, admonishing citizens to not hoard masks and disinfectant, while hucksters and quack doctors extorted the crisis with opportunistic zeal, hawking all sorts of homemade remedies, ranging from burning hot coals with brown sugar to boiling stews of serpentine crystals. Not to mention, drug companies made a killing off cough syrup. As this dismal tide was rising, Igor Stravinsky, a Russian composer long expatriated from his home country, was now facing financial hardship and decided to move his family to Switzerland in search of new streams of income. Even in uncertain times, Stravinsky could always suss out potential benefactors, and in this case, at this time, it would be a thoroughly Swiss affair. In the process of developing his famous stage work, L'Histoire du Soldat, he asked the Swiss writer and Lausanne native, C.F. Ramuz, to write an adaptation of a particularly Faustian Russian folktale. They aspired together to form a small traveling theater group with which such works could be taken on the road. Eventually, this effort came to the attention of one Werner Reinhardt, a Swiss merchant, philanthropist, and amateur clarinet player. Reinhardt was so taken with Stravinsky's collaboration with Ramuz that he underwrote the first performance of L'Histoire du Soldat. The premiere, on the evening of September 28th, was a great success. And despite decidedly difficult circumstances, the composer was newly hopeful for the future. But on the very next morning, September 29th, Stravinsky woke up with a fever. In October of 1918, 25,000 Swiss died of the Spanish influenza, 60% of whom were young men between the ages of 20 and 40. Stravinsky at the time was 36 and was considered at the onset of the war of too weak a constitution to be conscripted into the Imperial Russian army. And I bring all of this up not only to make the case for Stravinsky's susceptibility to adverse illness, but also to introduce how these events play into a sort of credo that Stravinsky developed over the course of his life, one that was modeled around resilience and adaptability amidst chaos. As was his good fortune throughout life, he managed not only to avoid military service, financial ruin, and the war more broadly, but the worst effects of the Spanish flu as well. He recovered unscathed, suffering only mild symptoms for the duration of his illness. Lausanne, however, was in dire straits. So while Stravinsky was convalescing at home, the virus was overtaking the city. Hospitals busted at the seams. Thousands of men his age were dying, and protests erupted all over the country. And yet, even in this epic morass, Stravinsky had the sensibility to write the 3 pieces for clarinet as a gift to his new benefactor, Werner Reinhardt, to whom this piece was dedicated. So through this historical lens, I've tried to correlate the circumstances surrounding the conception of these 3 pieces with my own experience living through a global pandemic. In the first movement, as you heard, Stravinsky evokes out of the solo clarinet a sort of primordial loneliness, wedding fear and isolation into one lethargic, plaintive, almost medieval-like chant. The second piece, by contrast, is completely unmoored from any sort of meditative state, and in the score itself, the music is presented entirely without bar lines. For me, this is the point where the fever breaks, and the psychological toll of isolation emerges as a kind of frenetic restlessness. Midway through, however, the frenzy recedes, and a brief, goofy little colloquy between the middle and lower register of the instrument takes place. The lower register, as you will hear, honks and snaps like a cantankerous goose, while the middle register intercedes with coy little melodies that play out between the breaths. And I've come to imagine this section as that phase of quarantine when, after being alone for so long, cabin fever really starts to set in and things get, to be frank, a little weird. This episode eventually whips itself into a recapitulation of the opening, but with the addition of a brief and weary coda, perhaps an expression of a now slightly more embarrassed resignation. Ernest Ansermet, the conductor of that successful premiere of L'Histoire du Soldat, influenced Stravinsky very much so by sharing with him music he had acquired in the United States. Upon Ansermet's return from one U.S. trip, he brought back copies of a burgeoning American musical form, the ragtime. Its ragged syncopations enticed Stravinsky, who had already quite a refined taste for rhythmic asymmetry, and it melded perfectly into his own aesthetic. These 3 pieces are a direct outgrowth of that inspiration. And in a way, they're a sort of condensed quarantine version of the C.S. Vermoux's story about the devil who sells a soldier untold wealth for music lessons. Not unlike Histoire, these pieces capture a confrontation with loneliness, the hysteria of facing down our own demons, and the frenzy that ensues when we are isolated from loved ones. This last movement I'm about to play is a direct relative of the Ragtime from l'Histoire, but it actually quotes most notably the Devil's Dance from that work. It hurls itself out the gate at breakneck speed. Considering the circumstances, this piece is something of a miracle. Many a great artist's life has been cut short by diseases of their time or other maladies not yet treatable by modern medicine. And the cliche of the great artist who dies abruptly, often at the peak of their artistic powers, leads all sympathetic admirers to ponder the same question. What if they hadn't died so young? What else might they have written? What would Mozart's music, for example, have sounded like after his Requiem? Or Schubert after his Shepherd on the Rock, published only a month before his death? Or George Gershwin, for that matter, of whom I learned in the course of my research died at 38, just as he was beginning to write for film, no less. And I had no idea. In all of these cases, we'll never really know what artistic fruit they had yet to bear. So in this context, we shouldn't take for granted the fact that, if only for a fleeting moment, a pivotal event, an instance where Stravinsky's career could very well have been cut short by disease and premature death, he survived the most deadly infectious disease in modern history, the Spanish influenza. If we consider the full gravity of this, it's an opportunity to invert the notion of the great artists torn down at the peak of their powers and ask instead, what music would we have been deprived of had Stravinsky succumbed to the same illness that killed 25,000 of his countrymen, had he died in that most turbulent fall of 1918? And the immediate answer would be the three pieces for solo clarinet. In conclusion, I'd like to get back to that credo just very shortly that I had alluded to at the opening. Stravinsky was not only a singularly brilliant artist, but also a remarkably resilient one, with a unique ability to parlay any crisis into inspiration, even career advancement. And this is where I find Stravinsky's own personal artistic philosophy to be most instructive. It is here that I think there is a useful corollary to our own times. See, Stravinsky fundamentally believed that unexpected circumstances, whether they come in the form of a world war or a pandemic, or even something as innocuous as he would say, the slip of a pen, didn't have to be seen as impediments to one's goals, but rather could be viewed instead as parallel to inspiration. He didn't see chance events as merely happenstance, nor did he interpret them superstitiously. Instead, Stravinsky preferred to see unanticipated occurrences and distractions in the creative process or in life as gifts of chance. In the transcript from his 1972 lecture at Harvard entitled The Poetics of Music, Stravinsky speaks explicitly about the way he sees the role of chance in our lives. He says, "One does not contrive an accident. One simply observes it and draws inspiration therefrom. An accident is perhaps the only thing that really inspires us." My name is Robert Walker. I am the second clarinet here with the Louisville Orchestra, and thank you for spending this time with me. I'd like to thank our subscribers for watching. After all, this piece was written during a global pandemic as a thank you to the patron who'd saved Stravinsky's career. And in that same spirit, I want to thank you for contributing to help keep our organization afloat as well, to help us parlay our own unforeseen circumstances into an opportunity for progress and growth. We really appreciate your support and hope to see you again in real life soon.